Hello there everyone. In this video I'm going to go through all of the questions that you've posted in the last day, and we'll just try to go through them pretty quick so the video doesn't take too long, but I also want to help. So this first question, how to debug Node, also what's up with the headers. So I am going to download this solution right here. So this is just from the lesson 2 solution, and I'm just going to say download zip. And I'm going to open up VS Code. I'm also going to open up my files, and I'm just going to unzip this. And I'm going to drag this onto here. So that's me. There we go. Okay, now to get this to run properly, I need to do two things. First, I just need to run npm install. That will give me my node modules folder. It's going to install everything that is in these dependencies. Okay. Next, we did have a database involved, which means I need to have an env file. So I actually have an env file right here, and I'm just going to drag this over into my folder. All right, so I just copied and pasted it here. I just dragged it from over there. You can see my environment file just has one variable and then my MongoDB connection string. Okay, so with both of those here, I'm just going to run npm start. Let's make sure this is working. And then we'll try to debug it here in a sec. Okay, so that is working. If I go to my routes.rest file and I just run this request, let's see if that works. That did work. Okay, so I got my data back from my database. And this only works if I have the REST client extension installed, which is this one right there. Okay. So I was able to run this and it's working great. Now let's debug this. Let's say there was an issue and I want to actually debug this. So I will first direct you to our FAQ page. I think there's a question about this. Maybe there's not. Nope, there's not. So I'll add this to this page here in a little bit, but let's go ahead and do this. So I'm just going to go into my debug section here. So I'm just going to click here, and I'm going to say create a launch.json file. Now it's recognizing, VS Code recognizes that I'm in a Node project, and so it says, hey, you want to use your workspace folder and then app.js. I don't have, oh, I do have an app.js. Sweet. So this actually might work just the way it is. I'm going to call this node debugger. Actually, no. I should not change that type. I thought that was the name. This looks perfect. Node.js, debug Node.js backend project. So now if I go, I'm just going to hit save here, and I'm going to close that. If I click on debug now, oh, why didn't that work? Huh, that's a weird bug. Okay, so I'm actually gonna close VS Code for a sec because it's not recognizing that I just created a launch.json file, and I did. So I'm just gonna quit and then reopen it. And let's see if it recognizes it now. It still doesn't. What is going on? Okay, there must be some settings somewhere. So I'm just gonna go VS Code debug node. VS Code, they have some really good documentation on this actually. So let's see here. It shows how to do it. There's a launch.json file. Okay, well, I actually can't find it in here. That's okay. So I'm gonna go into my settings here, or preferences, I guess. Yeah, preferences, settings. I'm just gonna search for node debug. Um, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, just going to change this first one to always. Debug JavaScript. I'm going to say node. I still don't know why it's not recognizing. Okay, but it did run my server. So it didn't work a minute ago. I had to have this debug JavaScript auto attach filter on. I set it to always. And now when I hit this debug button, it's actually running my server. It says connected to DB and listening on 8080. I can see this debug console right here. There's also a lot of other things that I can see. I can see where my breakpoints are. If I wanted to watch a specific variable, I could put that in. I can see this call stack, which will show the history of what's actually running. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put a breakpoint inside of this get all. I'll put 2 breakpoints in here. Okay. I'm going to put it inside of this get all function. And once I run the route that gets all, it'll actually stop here. And this is really cool because I can look at the call stack and I can see where this was. So there's all this like node code that it's going through. Somewhere in here, I'll see my route. Okay, but there's a lot in here. Let's see what that app one is. Anyways, so it'll just go through. I can see all the code that's being run until we land on this point. I can see all of my variables here. I can also see them over here. I can see what this rec object is. I can see that there's no request body. I can look at my query parameters right here, or my URL parameters, I should say, which I don't have any. I will once we debug this one. But I can see all this, which is super, super helpful. I'm going to put a breakpoint right there. Actually, I'm just going to say go to the next breakpoint. This says continue executing until it ends or until the next breakpoint. The reason why I did that is because this MongoDB stuff is going to take time. Okay, and so now if I look at result, I have this big thing, and so I'll say go to the next breakpoint. And it looks like lists. We should have a nice list of all of our contacts, and I can see them all, which is really cool. Okay, so we have our debugger all set up. I'll go ahead and let that go. I'll just say continue execution. There's no more breakpoints, and that works great. So let's try one more. I'll say, yep, let's run this one with the single contact. And we can see the rec.params.id is right there. I can also see it over here if I look at the params. I can see that ID field. Really, really helps being able to do this in debug. So I'm just going to let that go, let it finish. And we have this, okay. And it didn't get anything. It looks like I don't have that ID in my database, which is totally fine. All right, now headers. Let's talk a little bit about headers. I'm just going to talk about every header that's in our application currently. We have this set content type of application application JSON. This is just saying that my request is going to deal with JSON, and I want to send JSON back. Same thing with here, the exact same thing. The only other header that I have set, I think, is right here. Access control allow origin. I will allow requests from any IP address, any URL. I'll allow anyone to hit my API, and that's great. Okay. There are a lot of headers that I can set. I can find a comprehensive list, just HTTP headers. Mozilla. Of course they'd be first. I bet W3 Schools has a good article on this too. But there are really a bunch. Okay, these are all the headers. We'll deal with maybe like a half a dozen in this class. So they all do different things, but the 2 that we're using currently, that's what they do. So, all right. Why we use them? It's just to basically specify settings for my entire API. So the access control allow origin one, that's just my way of allowing my API to be secure. Our APIs in this project are not going to be secure. We'll say, yep, we'll allow access from anywhere. But if I was publishing this for someone and I made a front end for it, I would only allow access from my front end. Next question. Okay, so that looks great. I don't see any errors here. It looked great. It is about the team assignment for the last week. REST is working local front end also. That looks great. But localhost gives me this result. I do not understand why. So this route, this is a back-end route, and this is what it looks like on the front end. It looks like, yeah, so that's just running. This is the front end running directly. The tricky part with this is we have a front end and a back end. We have two separate projects. So that's what the front end looks like. This is what it looks like if you put the back end route into the browser, but that's the back end coming in here. And that's the exact same thing that this REST client will show us with this very simple get, no headers. If I put this URL directly into the browser, I would see this. Like that's exactly what's going on here. So hopefully that helps. And Thunder Client gives this result. That's interesting. Thunder Client should give a better result. You don't have to use both. If you'd rather use the REST client, that's totally fine. For my Thunder Client, let's see here. I'll say new request, HTTP, localhost 8080/contacts. I could have copied that from our REST file. Oh, it was refused. It still says it's listening, so I probably just have a typo in there somewhere. Let me copy that. Come back over here. That looked strikingly similar. So I'm not sure why this isn't working. Let me stop the debugger. Oh, it looks like it is stopped. Okay, there's something weird going on here. Okay, debugger attached. It's probably because I said always earlier. And I'll say send. Okay, so my server just wasn't running. Notice that ran totally fine. Even though it is debugging, I can just deactivate my breakpoints here and it'll act like it's not debugging. But then if I ever want to put in a breakpoint, I can. So anyways, it did work. But yeah, if one or the other works for you, the REST client or the Thunder client, you can use either. They do the same thing. Okay, let's see here. Nothing's working. I don't know how to catch up. So a lot of people, I think, are feeling like this right now. And I want to just say two things about this comment. One, this first project is incredibly difficult, which is why you have the solutions. And two, the first project also weighs very, very little on your grade. Your final project is about half your grade. This first project, I think, is like 10 or 15% of your grade. Like, it's not very heavy on your grade because it is hard. And we're using this project to just learn. So if you are feeling like this though, please set up an appointment with me. Please message me before you drop. I don't want to. This class is going to end up getting really easy, but these first few weeks are going to be really tough. I understand the fundamentals, but maybe a video that could elaborate would be helpful. What is middleware? Can I use Node to give a schema to the database? What is a WebSocket in Node? Oh, those are really good questions. So middleware, if I come back over here, we have a few examples of it. So Node is very just, I can add anything, I can change anything, I can put anything anywhere I want. If I want an entire project to be in one file, I can. But if I have stuff separated out into different files, it really helps because I can reuse things. So let's say, for example, that every single one of my routes I needed somebody to be logged in for. And on a front end, that's great. Like, they just have to be logged in. On the back end, though, I have to make sure that every single request has a valid way to authenticate them. And so I might make something called like a folder called middleware. And I might make one called like validateuser.js. Now, I'm not going to write this right now. It's a little bit out of the scope currently. But let's say I export this something called, I export a function called like validateuser. Okay. In here, in my app.js, I can import that and then just say validateuser. I can also do that in my routes file. I can do that in my controllers. And what's going to happen is if this route is hit, it's going to validate the user. If inside of validateuser, I have this thing that says next, if something's successful, or I have like a catch, that didn't work. I'm not going to write this. Or I have a catch that doesn't work. If it hits next, then it'll go ahead and move on to that route. If it doesn't, it'll just stop it and send an error or do whatever I tell it to do. Okay, but that's what middleware is. It allows me to just like inject things into different places of my Node application. Can I use Node to give a schema to the database? Absolutely. It depends on the database, but there are lots of ORMs that allow you to do it really easily, whether it's a NoSQL or relational database. With MongoDB, a lot of people will use something called Mongoose, which I think one of my tutorials or one of my videos in the class actually shows what Mongoose looks like. I'm just going to say Mongoose Node schema example. Just going to go to images. So this right here, this is a JavaScript environment declaring a Mongoose schema for the database. And if I look at the file structure, let's see, there's a models folder right there. Like that's kind of what it looks like. I wonder if I can find a better one. That one's using GraphQL. We're not touching GraphQL. Anyways, but short answer to that question, absolutely yes. What is a WebSocket node? A WebSocket node is the same thing as a WebSocket anywhere. A WebSocket allows you to keep a communication line open between two devices that are generally remote devices. So if I wanted an open connection to a database, for example, to MongoDB, if there was a change in MongoDB, I could display that change on the front end without having to refresh the page on the front end. In Node, the concept is the same, but it's just a little bit different. I would have to have a listener in JavaScript to basically automatically update stuff. But usually with how requests are made in Node, we don't have a huge need for WebSockets because a request will get made, and once it's made, we just query the database. But if there was something, if I had like a script, for example, if I wasn't building a RESTful API, if I just had a script that was going to display changes for the user, I can build any type of application with Node. Anything I can do with Python, I could do with Node. I could have a little CLI that shows something. I could even build a web page in Node that is directly connected to the database with a WebSocket that would have updating data in real time. So, question I got this morning, I'm trying to figure out how to connect MongoDB to my Visual Studio like you were showing in the video. So the video, if I go to mongodb.com, with this question, let me just preface this. You do not have to connect MongoDB to Visual Studio Code. You do not have to download MongoDB Compass. These are simply means of you visualizing and manipulating your database manually to prepare you to do it in your code. So I generally just do this here in the browser. Okay, I can go to my contacts database, go to my contacts. If I want to add something or change something, I can manage my database here. Okay, with that said, I can also go back to just my cluster. Whoops. Oh, geez. I think it's that one. I can also go back here and I can say connect. And it just gives me instructions for how to connect to VS Code. And you download a VS Code extension or you download MongoDB Compass. Both ways, though, they give you a connection string. And you connect the same way, you just put that string in. For your code to actually run, you put that string into an environment variable, okay? But anyways, I would just follow that, but again, you don't have to connect to it. Rec Resin next. Student came into my office this morning wondering about this. Why is this here? What does this even mean? These are input parameters for this function that's being used. Now you might be like, well, where's the function? This is a function. I could give it a name. I could say const my function equals that. And then right here, I could say app.useMyFunction. That is not going to give me any errors. My validate user is still going to give me errors. Let me just delete that and delete that. This, though, is going to work perfectly. I can declare this function. I can give it a name, and I can just plop it in here. Some people like to do that. If it's pretty short, though, I will leave it in its anonymous state, and I'll just plop it in there. Okay. Anyways, with that said, Rec, res, and next are things that are built into Node and Express that allow you to easily access your request object for a function and the response object. So when I say response.setHeader, okay, again, this is setting the header for the response for basically my entire application, saying, yep, I'll allow access from anywhere. The request object I use a lot over here. I say rec.params.id to get an ID from a route, okay? Or rec. I guess it's not here. Week3, I'll have rec.body, okay, when I'm actually submitting a JSON body with a put or a post. Okay, so we have this request object, which is coming from the request. We have the response object, which is what I do with it when I want to send a response back to the origin that made the request. And then next, sometimes I'll use, sometimes I won't. This is just a way to force Node to continue something if I want to do something else. So this right here will just end the function. If there was something else that I wanted to do, maybe data cleanup or something, I could call that and it would continue running code somewhere else in my application. Help explain the code in last week's solution. So we've explained a lot of it today. The only thing I want to touch on right now though is how the app connects to the routes and the controller and where this ID is coming from. So routes, I'm injecting basically all the functionality from here into my app.js. The app.js is like the hood of a car. It is where everything connects. And so yes, I could have everything in this one file, but to make it more easily manageable, we split things up. We have exports and imports, and it makes it a lot more manageable and scalable in the long term as an application grows. So I'm going to use that, and all this is doing currently is just referencing contacts. If I had more collections in my database, I might have something called like favorites. If I had a favorites collection, or let's say I had like a recipes, I have no idea, you guys. But I would probably have a routes file for each collection in my database and a controller for each collection in my database. And so having this index structure just sets me up for success. It just sets me up really nicely to have everything set up in an organized way. For this first project, you only have one collection, so you just have contacts. This ID, notice that for this route, I say /:ID. That's where the name for this is coming from. Yes, it's case sensitive. Yes, it has to match exactly the same. And yes, while we were debugging earlier, we could also see that, which would also help. So, all right, that is it for this section. Let's go to this next section. 12 replies, good for you guys. Okay, just thought I'd share some resources. Thanks, Riker, that's awesome. Okay, a couple questions I've had. The reading assignments in previous weeks seem to show ways to implement things like MongoDB in a completely different way than the solution does. Is that pretty typical in web development? Yes. Where there are just completely different ways to implement the same exact module or tool? Yes. The only reason I feel I've been able to keep up is by adapting my old code from web full stack development and taking a line or two from example videos. Most of the readings have only helped me marginally, and everywhere else I look seems to have totally different answers. Yeah, so the readings might not be helpful for you at all. If I were you, maybe you want to go to Udemy and download a course. Okay? It's really interesting because these lessons, if I look at, let's just look at the requirements for the lesson 3 assignment. I just tell you what to do and I don't tell you how to do it. If anyone's had an internship, that's how it is. If anyone's had a full-time job in this field, that's exactly how it is. When my boss tells me how to do something, he doesn't even give me this much. He's like, hey, I need my users to be able to do this. And then I break it down. It's like, okay, well, I have to make all this then on my back end and make a bunch of stuff on my front end and figure out how to do every single one of those. So my goal for this is to get you to that point where you can be in industry and just figure stuff out. Now, recognizing the huge jump from, say, CSE340 and any other course that you've likely taken here, and this, I give you solutions for the first month of the course. Videos, code. I say you can pretty much submit the code if you want to. Like, download my code, put in your own environment file. Like, you getting it to run is still huge because you still have to get your database up and running. You still have to get render up and running. You still have to get it to GitHub. Like, there's still a lot that you have to do even if you downloaded my code. So to the comment here, these learning materials might not be helpful at all. These were just some resources that I found real quick and like, yep, these are great resources. but some of them might be helpful, some of them might not be. There was another question I got this morning. I was like, someone was like, I feel behind, I don't know how to catch up. And if you feel like that, just download the solution for this week and get it to work. Okay, that's my suggestion there. But no, there are always a lot of different ways to do things. If we get stuck and can't figure out a working solution, are we able to copy and adapt? Yes. Yep. Yeah, you're totally good. Feel free to meet with a tutor. Feel free to set up an appointment with me also. But yeah, that code is there for you to use. And as I said earlier today, I don't grade heavily on these assignments. I really just grade it just so that you'll do them. But please use these solutions, use these assignments to learn. Okay. Okay, we got a tutorial here. A question about this week's reading. In the section about adding user, it gives an example of adding user number 4. What if there were already a user number 4? Would this code overwrite that user? Okay, let's look at it. Number 4. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, so we have 3 users there. Scroll down, that's beautiful. Yeah, and so if we added this, I'm seeing 3 duplicates. And where you'd handle that is in the backend code. So for example, let's go to the lesson 3 solution. Let's go to the code. And if I go to my controller to add a user, okay, get all, get single, create contact. Right here, there is no logic that says if there's a duplicate, don't add it. If I was going to look at like the week 5 or 6 solution, which I don't think it's there, but week 5 and 6 is when we get into data validation, error handling. None of that we do right now. We're just learning like the bare bones of how to do this. Well, I guess there is a little bit of error handling right there. But there's no logic in here to check to make sure that something is unique. Okay. So to that question, no, it wouldn't override it. It would just duplicate it. It would just insert contact for a second time because we haven't put any logic in here. Now, if I wanted to put in logic, I could be like, okay, if I want the unique identifier to be an email, I would first, right here on line 22, before I create this contact, I would make a request to my database and say, are there any users with this email? If there are, I'm going to send back a response like this that says, hey, your email has to be unique. This email is already taken. And if there isn't a match, then I'll run this code. Okay? And we'll get into that in a couple of weeks. But that's a great question, and I love where your head's at. I agree with Caleb. The fact that the solutions in GitHub are so different from the code you end up with working through the tutorials really makes it hard for me to figure out what I'm doing. I don't even know what questions to ask at this point. I really hope things do get easier in a few weeks. I'm feeling really frustrated at this point. And what is this Heroku that you keep referencing in the videos but isn't in any of the readings? Is that something we're supposed to be using? Okay, let's talk about Heroku first. It is in the videos, and we're not using it. I don't know, that really stinks. I'm in the process of cleaning up the videos. The reason why it's there and we're not using it anymore is because they started charging money. So we're using Render instead. So all the rubrics, they don't say anything about Heroku. Ever, ever, ever. Okay? If you look at this rubric, this is all that you have to worry about for your assignment. This is all you're going to get graded on. There's nothing about Heroku here or Firebase. You don't have to do anything with Heroku or Firebase. Okay? But again, I apologize for that confusion. It really stings, and I'm in the process of getting those videos cleaned up. Next one, feeling really frustrated? Yes. Most of you are probably feeling very frustrated because it is very, very hard to just get thrown into the deep end. The student that came into my office this morning, he was like, man, I just feel like I'm supposed to know all this stuff, and I don't. And I'm like, you don't need to know all this stuff. You do need to do all this stuff, which means you have to learn, which is why I give you guys these solutions these first few weeks. It is going to get easier. I absolutely promise it's going to get easier. Because the next project that you do, you're going to do everything that you've done this time again. You're just going to pick the project for yourself. You're going to add some error handling, add some checks like we just talked about with the last one with not duplicating contacts and stuff. But it's going to get a lot easier. I was able to complete the assignment. Everything looks good on my local host and GitHub, but Render is not deploying my code. This is the error I'm receiving. I've been receiving this since Friday with a tutor. Could you help? That's a really interesting question. I saw a few of these in the help and extra credit channels of these spaces. And when I also looked at that on GitHub, I can't copy that. So Let me just go, or not on GitHub, on Stack Overflow. So Node.js render, was that it? Nope. 2 of those, that. Unexpected token. I just copied this. Oh, there we go. Oh, come on. Yeah, so I just copied that error yesterday, and Stack Overflow said that it was from a node version mismatch. Why isn't that here? Yeah, anyways. So the way to fix that, in my package.json, I can actually specify an engine. So if I say package.json specify node version, this will basically force my localhost and render to use the same version. So let's see here, right here, I'll just copy this and I will just plop it anywhere in here that you want. Now with this, I would say go to your terminal and just run node version. My computer's freezing up. Come on, little guy. Node version. Wow. Node dash version. Let's try that. There we go. So 19.6. So I could just put 19.6.0 right there. And then I'd also say npm dash version, which is 9.4. So I don't even need a range in here. I could just put it like that. But this is going to force my localhost to use that version when I'm running it, which is what's here. That's what it's been using most likely. And I only say most likely because I have other node versions installed on this computer for other projects. But now when I deploy this to render will also use these versions as well. When it runs npm install, it'll get all the packages for and the node code for these versions. So that is how I would fix that issue. Let's see. That looks great. Okay. Oh, nice. Thanks, Jared. That's awesome. One question I have in specific in regards to last week's assignment, my GET request shows that it's connecting to the database, but no information is being returned. I have 2 IP addresses already in place. One that was given to me by default by MongoDB, and the other one I created that was all zeros. That's perfect, by the way. This is for your network access. And for this first project, I'm totally fine with you just leaving it as I accept all IP addresses. That's what the all zeros does. The first image below is my GET request link, and the second image is what the GET request returns. This has been stumping me for a few days. Got nothing. Okay, so MongoDB is extremely picky. Okay, for example, if I go back to MongoDB and I look at my collections, if this, why does it keep doing that? If this collection had like a capital C, I would get that result. I'd have that empty array result because I have no contacts in my lowercase contacts collection because it's an uppercase, for example, right? So that's really picky. The other thing, let me open up my environment file. Try to close this. I have no desire to change my password. Okay, this is the very end of my connection string, my MongoDB URI connection string. It ends with this /contacts. That is the name of my database. So if I come back over here, there's my database, lowercase contacts. And then in my controller, so if I go back to my controller and I say collection contacts, that's my collection, this lowercase contacts. So this first one I actually have in my environment file, the second one I have in my controller. Now I could change that. I could say the DB is called contacts. And if I did that, I would just have to remove that last bit from my environment file. Because all of them are going to be contacts, I leave it like that. Because usually I only have a single database for a node project. So I'll just have it in my environment variable. So with that said, that's most likely why you're getting an empty data set back. It's probably something as simple as, okay, the DB is wrong or the collection is wrong. But if you want me to help you debug that, I'd be more than happy to. and we can look at it more closely for both of you. Let's see. Nice, thanks Samuel. I was never able to get the database connection working for the personal assignment. I would appreciate a walkthrough of this using JS. The videos used TypeScript, as well as an explanation of why we might use or not use Mongoose. So Mongoose we already talked about a little bit earlier. You can use whatever you want. I think most of my solutions don't use Mongoose. As far as getting the database connection to work, I will direct you back to the FAQ. So I'm just gonna filter this out to just be MongoDB. Mongo isn't connecting. How can I troubleshoot? There's a nice video here on troubleshooting issues. How to create a database, a collection, a document. How to select an item or document from the database. How can I check if I'm connected to Mongo? I would look at some of these questions. Most of them I did make a little video for, and it would be very, very helpful if you're having any issues. For anyone that's having issues connecting to MongoDB, check this first. Okay, that's exactly what this is here for. Anytime I get like a bunch of questions about something, I'll try to make a question here on the FAQ for it to help with future students and current students. So, well, sorry that took so long, you guys. That was like a solid 36 minutes. But I hope that this was helpful. I'll probably end up doing this a couple more times in this semester, just taking a huge dump of questions and answering them. But if you have any other follow-up questions, just let me know. I'm always happy to help.